are ready to go.
We are. I would just ask that at the beginning of the meeting, anybody who is not on the board or the attorney would probably mute their video and their audio. So,
Okay.
all right. I think it's showtime.
All right. Well, I want to welcome everybody to the May 7th board meeting of the Clean Energy Alliance. And thanks to all those who are attending. And I would ask that anybody who's not on the board currently to go ahead and mute your microphones, and we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. And may I ask the board secretary to call roll?
Board Member Haviland.
Here.
Board Member Becker.
Present.
Chair Schumacher.
Present. And we are in the city of Carlsbad for this meeting, so I will go ahead and lead us with the Pledge of Allegiance. We could all put our right hand over our hearts. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. And we'll go into the board comments and announcements. Any comments or announcements from board members? Ms. Haviland.
I just want to say I hope everyone is doing well and staying healthy, and say how much I appreciate our staff and all of the people who have been working double duty to get us through this difficult time. And it's really nice to be together with this group and talk about something other than COVID-19.
Well, I'll second that then, okay?
Wonderful. Excellent. And Board Secretary, do we have any presentations today?
No, we do not.
Okay, well then we'll move right into the approval of the minutes. The minutes of meeting held January 16th, 2020, the minutes of the meeting held February 20th, 2020, and the minutes of the meeting held April 16th, 2020. Any objection to taking these all in one foul swoop?
No.
Then I'd hear a motion to approve all three sets of minutes.
I move to approve all three sets of minutes.
And I'll second that.
And Board Secretary, would you please take roll?
Board Member Haviland.
Yes.
Board Member Becker.
Yes.
Chair Schumacher.
Aye. And moving on to the new business portion of the agenda item today, item 1, Clean Energy Alliance Financial Pro Forma Review and a 5-year goals and vision discussion. And I will hand it over to Ms. Boswell.
Okay, thank you, Chair Schumacher. Let me share my screen for the presentation. Okay, can everybody see the slide that says special board meeting May 7th? Okay, great. Okay, the first item before the board at today's special meeting is an item that has several different subtopics for discussion and direction today. First, we'll be reviewing the initial draft of the Clean Energy Alliance, and we'll actually be reviewing the updated initial draft with the direction provided by the board at the last meeting for alternative scenarios and sensitivities to look at incorporating into the pro forma and testing. So we have that for the board this afternoon. Then the board will move into a discussion of 5-year goals and vision and provide direction with regards to priorities from potential CCA programs that support the JPA goals, climate action plan goals, economic development and revitalization, which is particularly important, I think, in these times, local development, and support low income as has been identified by the JPA agreement. Third, we'll be looking at the Citizen Advisory Committee and seeking board direction with regards to creating that policy. Then moving into discussion of a Clean Energy Alliance strategic plan and looking for direction with regards to moving forward on developing a strategic plan for the authority. And last but certainly not least is a discussion and direction regarding an inclusive, sustainable workforce policy. I have with us to assist with the presentation are John DeLessie and Kirby Dussel. They are with Pacific Energy Advisors, and they are the technical advisors for Clean Energy Alliance that have prepared the Pro Forma for us today. The initial draft was initially reviewed on April 16th. And after that review, the board requested scenarios to be looked at that included a 100% PCC1 or bucket 1 renewable energy content, or the renewable energy to come from 100% bucket 1 sources at launch. And then a second scenario that looked at getting us to 100% by 2023. You'll remember the base scenario at approximately 81% or 82% from bucket 1 and the 18% from the bucket 2 category renewables. The board also asked for us to continue modeling to look at modeling the 2% rate discount to customers, as well as a 1% rate discount. There was also a request to look at an option for a city to opt to a default energy product that was sourced from 50% renewable and 75% carbon free. And that would be considered an option with our base would be 50% renewable and 50% carbon free as directed in the JPA agreement. And last but not least is also offering a 100% renewable energy that customers could individually choose to opt into should they choose. So with that, I think I would like to invite John DeLessie from Pacific Energy Advisors to take us through the presentation of the updated Pro Forma.
Great, thank you. My name is John DeLessie with Pacific Energy Advisors, and looking forward to someday meeting everybody in person, but happy to be here to present the follow-up from the April 16th meeting. So just as a reminder, this is the Pro Forma Summary under what we were calling kind of the base case projections. And that's with the 50% renewable energy and the various sort of policy parameters that Barbara outlined. It also, as a reference point, assumes rate parity. So the revenues here do not reflect any discounts, but then we'll show the impact of various discount scenarios and various power supply mix scenarios. So a couple of things just to point out on the Pro Forma is the operating margins that's about the 7th item down on the table. There we go. Which is projected to be positive. So these are the revenues less the operating expenses, but before funding reserves and financing costs and other uses. And then the net surplus, which is down in Roman numeral 6, that's really the remaining funds after covering the targeted contribution to reserves, as well as various deposits and other cash uses. So that's really the money that's projected to be available to fund rate discounts or different resource mix, maybe more expensive resource mix options, or even potentially new customer programs. So that's really the number that we are focusing on as we look at the various sensitivities. Go to the next slide, please. So the scenarios we were asked to look at are shown here. First one is 100% renewable PCC1 energy at launch, so no use of PCC2. And of course, we're not using any PCC3 either. Second scenario was a 3-year phase out of PCC2, so 100% PCC1 renewable energy by 2023. And then we looked at a 2% rate discount and a 1% rate discount, both with the base case assumptions for power content and resource mix, as well as in combination with the two PCC1 scenarios that I just described, the ones listed above. And then we also looked at the cost increase and the associated rate impacts that would be associated with a member selecting the alternate default supply mix, the 50% renewable energy and 75% carbon-free energy mix. And then finally, we have assessed the incremental cost, the power supply cost of offering a voluntary 100% renewable energy product. And that would be selected by customers as opposed to default. This would be a voluntary option they could opt into. So these charts show the projected net surplus under the base case assumptions overlaid with the other scenarios. And so the chart on the left side shows the 1% rate discount scenarios, and the chart on the right shows the 2% rate discount scenarios. If you recall from the April 16th meeting, each 1% rate discount cost the program approximately $1 million in annual revenue. And you can see those impacts reflected on the charts here. Again, the top blue line in each of these are the base case with no discount. And then you can see how the 1% and the 2% discounts impact the projected net surplus by year. The other thing that you can see from these charts is that the cost impact of eliminating use of PCC2 and going all PCC1 is relatively small. It does increase over time as the overall renewable energy content increases toward 100%. But it is relatively small. In the first full year, which would be fiscal year 2022, the cost of eliminating all of the PCC2 is about $200,000 for that year. And then in 2025, we're estimating it would be about $400,000 for that year. So based on current projections, which of course will be refined over time, it appears it would be feasible to provide a 2% discount and avoid use of PCC2 if that is the board's preference. We will be regularly updating the pro forma as market conditions change, as we get closer to commencement of service and we have more certainty around the SDG&E rates and exit fees and power supply costs. And so, these issues can be reevaluated as we get closer to launch. But as of now, based on current market conditions and projections, it looks like any of these scenarios will yield positive net surpluses. One thing I wanted to note, a little footnote here on this slide, a little bit of a peculiarity when it comes to the PCIA and setting CEA's rates. Of course, when we design a CEA rate to achieve a certain discount, whether that's 1% or 2%, we need to account for the imposition of the PCIA, but there are actually multiple PCIA vintages that apply to different customers based on the year when the customer left SDG&E service. So we have assumed CEA rates would be designed based on the highest applicable vintage. In this case, the 2020 vintage that would be applicable to the customers that will be transferring service in May of 21. So by using the highest applicable vintage, that ensures that that the targeted discount that'll be a minimum. That would be what would be experienced by the majority of the customers. But to the extent some customers have a different vintage that might have a somewhat lower PCIA, then the savings to those customers would be a little bit greater. So I'm sure we'll be talking more about this later in the year as we get into the specifics of the rate design. but just wanted to point that out. A little bit of a peculiarity in the way that the PCIA is set, and we will have multiple vintages for CEA. We can.
And before we leave this slide, Chair and board members, John had mentioned we'd be continuing to monitor the pro forma, and I wanted to emphasize that we're also going to be monitoring impacts of COVID-19 on usage and usage projections, as well as changes in the energy market pricing and SDG&E rates. And I've also failed to mention that this does take into account board direction of continuing to contribute 5% of revenues annually into a operating reserve and building to a minimum 25%. So that's also been included in these projections.
Okay, so moving on to the other options, a 50% renewable energy, 75% carbon-free default supply mix could be provided. It would have an incremental cost, a higher cost than the 50-50, and that's estimated to be equivalent to about a 1% rate discount. So in other words, if the base discount offered by CEA is 2%, then the customers defaulting to the 50%, 75% mix would see a 1% discount. Likewise, if the base CEA discount is 1%, then the customers defaulting to the 50-75 mix would see rate parity, would see no discount. So the cost difference is equivalent to that 1% discount on the SDG&E rate. And then finally, the incremental power supply cost of supplying a voluntary 100% renewable energy product is estimated to be 0.75 cents per kilowatt hour. And so for the typical residential customer, that translates into an additional cost on the monthly bill of $2.80. That's a cost relative to the default product, not relative to SDG&E. Would be relative to the CEA default product. And one other point here, that reflects the incremental cost of buying the renewable energy. So moving from the 50% default up to the 100%. There may be some other administrative costs associated with administering that type of program that potentially could be included in that rate premium if desired. Some CCA programs just simply pass through the cost, the incremental cost of the power. Others set the premium a little bit higher to cover some of the administrative costs associated with that program. And with that, hope that's helpful information, and I'd be happy to address your questions.
Any questions from the board? And I can't see you, so just go ahead and pipe up.
Okay, I'll go first. One of the questions I thought we had talked about last meeting was talking about a 75% renewable product. And would that be much different than the 1% decrease in rate discount, do you think? Would that be about the same as the 50% renewable, 75% greenhouse gas free cost wise?
Yeah, so we didn't pick up on that and didn't run that, but I would say it would be more costly than the 75% GHG product. The renewable energy, the premium for renewable energy is greater than the premium for GHG free generally, let's say large hydro. So I would expect that the cost of that would be more than the 1%, the 1% equivalent discount. But we could follow up. We can certainly follow up with that information.
Okay, and then does that the slide before this does that also take into account paying back the cities their initial money that they put in, or is that not calculated on those, in any of those numbers?
It is. So that is the one change that we made in this slide here from what you saw April 16th is the refinancing of the initial funding. So the assumption here is that there would be external financing for that amount, charged at a 2% interest rate, and then so those initial funds would be returned to the members. And Barbara, please correct me if I don't have that 100% right.
No, that's correct.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's all I have at this time. Thanks.
Board Member Haviland, any questions?
One question. When as a board do we make the decision on which of these options that we're going to offer at Go Live?
I can answer that. So typically you would consider the policy decisions in advance of your rate setting. Rate setting is typically about 6 months, 4 to 6 months prior to launch. So I would say with a May 2021 launch, we would be considering those options in the fall timeframe of this year, late summer,
Okay.
early fall.
Great.
Thank you.
And then just to loop back around, just to follow up on that question from Board Member Haviland, I expect the pro formas for the other two options that the board had requested would be a little bit more drafted out a little bit further on. I know the request was sort of to give a brief draft pro forma of the 75% and 100% option, but we'd be looking at a more detailed analysis of that when we're doing the rate setting, correct?
Yes, you'd be looking at the details such as what's on the screen currently. Is that what you would like to see?
Yeah, I think we would need to see, that analysis. And then my apologies, Board Member Haviland, did you want to continue to ask questions?
No, that was my only question for now. Thank you.
If I could loop back over to slide 7, which, yes. So when I'm looking at that, I'm looking at the discounts with the category 2 phase out. And what I'm seeing in 2022 is that there's less of a net surplus with no PCC2 at startup. Is that correct?
Yes.
Great. Okay, that's it.
Okay, so with that, we will move on to the 5-year goals and visions. And for this, what we're looking for is just board direction with regards to identify programs, priorities for Clean Energy Alliance to focus on over the next 5 years. We've provided, we'll go over some sample CCA programs. These programs came from checking and looking at what CCAs have implemented, and Kirby Dussel is available to ask specific questions and be able to answer questions with regards to how those programs work, or provide more detailed information to the board should they like to see it. So the JPA agreement does specify goals and priorities of Clean Energy Alliance. A common theme is supporting member agency climate action plans, providing energy product mixes that have lower GHG emissions than San Diego Gas and Electric, that incorporate energy efficiency and demand response programs, that we procure local generation where appropriate, and offer a range of energy products and program options for customers, support low-income households through programs and product offerings, support Clean Energy Alliance long-term financial viability and customer rate stability, provide innovative energy programs, and maximize economic benefits, be financially stable, and well managed and responsive to regional and local priorities. So CCA programs tend to fall into specific categories. On these lists are mentioned some specific programs that are quite common, and they go from the most common down to the least common based on researching the 19 current operating CCAs. So all CCAs currently offer net energy metering programs, and many also, in addition to that, add some type of solar rebate or incentive payment or program to customers. They also all offer a 100% renewable voluntary opt-up program if they didn't already launch at a 100% renewable, which some do launch at 100% renewable. Then moving on to the more common are EV incentives, charging stations, energy efficiency related programs, feed-in tariffs, demand response, and on down the line. We do have slides that have more information with regards to the programs, and I'll walk quickly through them. Net energy metering typically would be established to be competitive with the IOU, in this case SDG&E. Generation credits are earned at the rate that the board establishes at the time the system is generating, and then those are used to offset charges that the consumer incurs by using electricity at the rate applicable at the time they're using it. At the end of the relevant period, if the system has generated more kilowatt hours of energy than was used, typically a net surplus compensation is paid, and it's often tied to the type of to the value of the solar production, and frequently is higher than what's currently paid by SDG&E or the incumbent IOUs. And there are some CCAs that limit the total net surplus compensation payout. For example, they'll put a $5,000 cap per year for a particular customer. Funding for this program would come from CEA's net surplus compensation. Solar rebates, again, are incentives. An example might be an offering of a several $100 rebate if a customer puts solar on their rooftop and they meet the right criteria of the program. This would be in addition to the net energy metering net surplus program and any prices or incentives that are offered there. And you often will see a solar and battery storage program that's tailored for medical baseline and low-income customers. So there may be a special incentive for that group of customers. And again, funding is generally would come from the CCA's net surplus funds available. We talked about the 100% voluntary service option, and typically that is paid for by the customers opting into that program. And we find participation rates generally fall between 2 to 3% of total retail sales opting into that program. A local solar retail service offering. So this would be something similar to maybe a community solar type project, or a solar development that CEA builds or has built, that then customers can subscribe to receive their energy from that program, and is priced, has a fixed retail price tied to the wholesale power cost from that particular project. And for those CCAs that offer these, we see less than 1% of total sales participation in this type of a project. It would be an alternative to SDG&E's EcoShare or EcoChoice program. And this program would be paid for by the customers that choose to opt into that program. Electric vehicle and electric charging incentives. Quite often you see these types of programs put together in partnership with local vehicle dealerships, the air pollution control districts, a local utility, in this case SDG&E, and then also EV charging station providers. And the CCA may provide an additional rebate or incentive for the purchase of a vehicle or installation of the battery charging, particularly if there is some type of demand response usage that the CCA has with regards to that. And this type of program would be funded by the CCA. There could also be grant funds from some of the partners. And this type of program, you often see a program cap assigned to it. So there's a total dollar pot set aside to fund this type of a project. Energy efficiency programs, so CCAs can apply to the PUC to administer through an elect to administer process to receive funds that are collected through the public purpose program funds that now go 100% to SDG&E. We can apply to administer those funds and then develop energy efficiency programs that would be in addition to what's offered by SDG&E. And the CCA customers continue to remain eligible to participate in energy efficiency programs offered through SDG&E. So this would be an additional offering. A feed-in tariff. Feed-in tariffs are developed to incentivize the development of small, locally situated renewable energy projects. And there are contracts or agreements that are executed between the CCA and the developer that has some specific criteria, and we develop a pricing structure for it. And then the CCA would, it would be considered eligible, or what criteria would be that it would be eligible for us, the CCA, to receive the renewable energy certificates as a PCC1, I believe, and Kirby can correct me if I'm wrong there. And typically these are long-term contract commitments and can help the developer or development move forward, as this would be part of their financing. And again, this would come out of our budget. It would be considered part of our energy procurement since it's satisfying part of our renewable and can be subject to a maximum cap, dollar cap. Demand response types of programs you see there would be rebates or incentives for things like smart thermostats, the EV chargers we talked about, or rebates or incentives for installation of heat pump water heaters. The idea there is to have the benefit of reducing peak demand, which can then lower our resource adequacy obligations and energy costs related to that. The funding there would be come from CEA's net surplus, although we would seek to achieve cost savings related to these programs. And again, we could set caps for these types of programs. Microgrid local solar and storage programs. These again can be tailored to reduce local peak demand and also address local resiliency needs. So it's almost like building a small microgrid that can be off-grid if there are reliability issues. There are grant opportunities that have recently become available through the California Energy Commission. And also we've seen public-private partnership opportunities for funding these types of projects and programs. Community grants, there are various different grants that are offered by CCAs for nonprofits or groups that are bringing forward ideas for innovative energy-related programs or education and outreach. Sonoma Clean Power has what they call their Spirit of Entrepreneurship grant, which is to assist entrepreneurs who are focused on reducing greenhouse gas emissions, energy efficiency, those types of programs. And again, this would be a program funded by Clean Energy Alliance net surplus. I think we're getting to the end. So building decarbonization, electrification would be supporting member cities in their building departments and developing building and transportation electrification reach codes for addressing building carbonization and meeting potentially climate action plan goals. Again, these are generally funded from the net surplus, but there are also, we've seen public-private partnership funding opportunities. So those are just some broad overview of the most common programs we see CCAs undertake. Many of them undertake these programs after they've been up and running for a couple of years. The first few years, of course, are focused on building reserves and becoming a viable, financially stable CCA program, but it's good to know what we're wanting to look at so that we can plan for those activities. Some of these have a longer planning horizon than others to get off the ground. So that concludes my presentation with regards to this section, and I'm happy to answer any questions and put it back to Chair Schumacher.
Thank you, Ms. Boswell. And do we have any questions from the board? And again, I can't see you, so please feel free to jump in. Maybe I'll go to Ms. Haviland first.
I don't have questions right now. Lots of comments at some point.
Okay, Ms. Becker, any questions from you?
No, I didn't have any questions. Thank you.
Okay. I had one quick question. If we can go back to one of the earlier slides on solar, there's a local solar. I don't believe it was on the matrix. Not that one, it's early. Yeah, the local solar retail service offering. So I just needed a second to look at the slide.
Sure.
Yeah, maybe while you look at that, if it would be agreeable, I'd just make a quick comment about this.
Certainly.
Yeah, so this particular service offering was plugged into the deck because it's been a really intriguing option. So the Sacramento Municipal Utility District here in Sacramento, where I'm sitting right now, has successfully offered a program that they call Solar Shares, which it essentially allows a customer to participate in what amounts to a net energy metering option by basically purchasing virtual shares of a community solar project that's developed by the utility. And it can be administered in a really kind of neat way within a fully integrated utility like a muni or an IOU, where there's service provided across both the generation and delivery spectrum, right? So they control all elements of the billing process, so there can be integration of these sorts of programs. With CCAs, it's a little bit different. You can't really offer that same sort of virtual net energy metering experience for the customer, but you can offer a rate that is representative of the cost of supporting a locally situated solar project. And in the case of Marin Clean Energy, they've actually received more interest than candidly I expected, where they developed one of their locally situated smaller scale solar projects, marketed that to customers as being an option that could serve 100% of their net annual energy needs in exchange for a fixed rate throughout the duration of their participation. So kind of exempted them from ups and downs in rates over time. It did, however, start at a relatively high rate to begin with. But the whole point is that these customers that were interested in supporting the development of new build, small scale solar, where they might not have the ability to put that on their own rooftop, they could do that through this sort of a program. And, you know, as a proportion of overall subscribership, you'll see here on the slide, it's pretty low. But when we're talking about, you know, several hundred customers having an interest in doing something like this, it's nice to be able to carve that out, provide that opportunity, and do it in a way that isn't really impactful, you know, in terms of the imposition of additional costs on the CCA program, because everything simply passed through to the customer. So they're literally supporting the ongoing operation of this locally situated solar farm, and that's kind of neat. So that's what the example is that you're looking at now, and it's been successfully deployed in MCE service territory as well as elsewhere in the state, in the muni world. And of course, you'll see here at the bottom, SDG&E and the other large utilities in the state also have their own kind of iterations of this now. In the case of SDG&E, their programs are Eco Choice and Eco Share, where you can purchase as a customer a specified proportion of your overall energy use through solar programs, or work with, you know, basically be funneled to developers that will develop projects that you can participate in, kind of like we're talking about here.
Okay, I appreciate that. So it's what is more commonly known as community solar. And it's my understanding that Sacramento Municipal, well, SMUD, had been waiting for a ruling from the California Energy Commission on their solar shares program. Do you have an update on that?
You know, I'd like to check on that and follow up with you. I know
Okay.
they fully subscribed the 2 megawatts that they had developed for their
Okay.
solar shares program. So I'd want to take a closer look at what the nature of the proceeding was and where, you know, where the ruling was basically focusing. You know, I have a curiosity about that because I'm not familiar with it. So I can certainly loop back out.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. That was my only question. So if we want to head into comments, I'd love to hear from the board members. Ms. Haviland, you said you had some comments?
Yes, I understand that we're to provide feedback on what are the programs that we'd like to see moving forward sooner rather than later. And so I'm really intrigued with this local solar retail service offering. I think we had a red dot not a red dot, sorry, that's a local term, a letter from a resident of Carlsbad that just talked about a program like this. And I think this is a great option for us to consider because there's a lot of people who live in our communities who would like to have the option of solar, but they would be required to cut down some of their trees. And so our climate action plans want us to encourage having a tree canopy, and that can be in conflict with also having local solar or clean energy. And so I think this is a great way to allow people to have both of those really valuable goals. Net energy metering, I think, is a great one to keep. There's a reason why it's so common amongst CCAs. It rewards the early adopters, and those are exactly the type of clients that we want to have to, you know, staying with the the Clean Energy Alliance once we launch. They are going to be probably our consumers for innovative programs moving forward as well. And then solar rebates and incentives. That's, I think, when we can afford to do that, I think it's really important. Anything we can do to make clean energy available to the most people, I would want to support. And I think we have to launch with a 100% renewable option. We want to be at least as good, ideally better than the options that people have available right now with SDG&E. And there are a number of people who opt into that program with SDG&E, and I would hate for them to feel like they would have to lose that in order to stay with the Clean Energy Alliance. Some of these other programs, I'm not as familiar with what the long-term costs would be in implementing them. So the feed-in tariff, demand response, how are these programs going to impact the cost of energy? And I don't have enough knowledge to have an opinion on that right now, but they obviously they're good programs that future our goals. And so I would like our energy consultant to maybe give us a little bit more feedback on when those types of programs would be appropriate for our JPA to consider. I think being a small JPA, it's really important for us to focus on resilience and innovation. I think that's something that a small JPA is most able to provide or to focus on. And so any program that's going to further those goals, I'd like to see reach a higher priority as well. And then we just keep getting further down the list. Obviously, we'd like to do all of these because they all head us in the right direction. But the ones I've talked about are the ones I would probably want to focus on initially.
Thank you very much, Board Member Haviland. Board Member Becker.
Yes, thank you. So I guess I want to go back and state that my number one goal right now, at least for the first 2 years, would be to be fiscally conservative and really attempt to build up our reserves and then I would love to do as many as possible of these programs. However, I know as long as these programs, they don't require capital outlay, right now, I'm for implementing them. For sure, the net energy metering, I agree. We can do that, and we should do that, and I think we could do that. I think we should actually do that right away, right now. And I actually think that we should maybe offer, instead of at parity with SDG&E, I think we should offer, I don't know, maybe 2 cent more than SDG&E would, because we really do want to keep those solar customers. And so I would be interested in that. Yes, the 100% renewable energy product is in our JPA. I also think that, what was the other? Let's see. I am very interested in still the electric vehicle ideas and having incentives for those. That's high on my list. Just I think it's absolutely fabulous that we have one of our member cities have a car country in it. So I'm just hopeful that we can work together and create a program with them. And I think that would be really important. That to me still seems like the key factor in decreasing our GHG. Let's see. And that local solar retail service does sound interesting. I'm interested in learning more about those, and in particular, Barb, I'm curious if any of these really did need to be started early. You mentioned that. I'd be interested to know if we do need to start work on any of those, so at the time that we do have reserves ready to go, that we aren't behind on those, I guess. And I don't know which one those would be. I'm not familiar enough with all of those, but I think that would probably be my comments right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Quick question on the local solar retail for staff. It may not be in use currently, but a community investment of that type, could it also work for local storage projects?
It could, as a matter of fact, and I think you could even create a construct, probably ideally, where you would have both, say, photovoltaic, solar, and storage coupled together, and allow a customer to participate in that sort of a opportunity. I think, you know, you'd have to kind of think through a little bit how it is that the storage infrastructure would be deployed and how that would be managed. So you'd be kind of trying to optimize use of the solar plus storage resource throughout the day. And I think where the rubber hits the road, I think on that item, is in how it is that you would ultimately charge the customer. Say if there are essentially dynamic impacts of deploying solar, charging storage, dispatching storage, and ultimately how you charge the customer for that. So I think, yeah, we just probably want to take a closer look, but I like the idea. I think it's a really neat way to help advance a broader build out of local infrastructure. And I think we could certainly do that. Just want to take a closer look to make sure that we get that right in terms of the rate that's ultimately passed on to the customer.
Okay, so I'd be very much interested in that, those two pairings. Also interested in how we might be able to incorporate some of our larger industrial partners or larger commercial partners in that. We do, for instance, have Encino Wastewater Authority, which is a JPA that is local and includes some of our cities. We do also have Poseidon, that might be potentially somebody that would want to partner up and come in through that direction. So this idea of a community investment partnership, both for our residents or for our customers that are residential, our customers that are commercial, and maybe some of the larger customers. And this would be a way that we could think about advancing the storage and solar local energy generation without those capital outlays that may as Ms. Becker mentioned, may be a little difficult for us to reach at the very beginning as we're building up our reserves, et cetera. So I think that's a really unique way for us to think about sort of an innovative and resilient way of targeting that at the local level. I'm really invested in that particular idea as a kind of a community investment side of things. Also the net energy metering, and for the reasons mentioned by my colleagues. Completely agree with the 100% renewable option. And then the solar rebates and incentives. So those items are what interest me the most.
Great.
So
I think we have some good direction. There was a question that was raised, and Chair Schumacher, I don't know if you would like Kirby to weigh in about what's the time horizon for developing, for example, this the local solar. You know, what's the horizon for planning and then implementing it? Is whether it's how long generally those take. Kirby, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, of course. And I think just kind of maybe a general comment that I would throw out there is that, you know, any of these programs that are customer funded or would result in costs that you would incur after, say, project build out occurs, something like that. Those are programs that you can typically launch at the time or slightly before you commence service. So, for example, net energy metering. That program in particular is something that we definitely want to take up as part of the rate setting process because it's hand in glove. You know, we would be talking about and because typically what happens with the net energy metering program, and you may be aware of this already, is that it plays off the existing retail rate schedule to a substantial extent. And then where the board direction here at CEA comes in is, you know, what are we going to do in terms of the surplus compensation? How are we going to compensate customers that produce more than they use over a given period of time? And, you know, how valuable is that energy in terms of when it's delivered? And, you know, as a result, what do we want to pay for it? So that's, I think, an upcoming conversation that will precede service commencement so that customers that are already engaged in energy metered service arrangements, they just, you know, move right in seamlessly. So that's very important to set up that program, for example, before launch. I think the feed-in tariff is another one where we can tee that up months before you launch to get that out to the market and get developers excited about opportunities to build out projects here in your service territory. As you are well aware, project development takes time. And so putting that out several months before you commence service, even though you don't yet have revenues, there's no cost to you in doing that. You can specify within the feed-in tariff itself the requirements for eligibility. And I think one of those requirements would be simply, we're not going to take deliveries of the power until we commence service. So you can line these things up by virtue of the tariff itself. And I think in the case of a feed-in tariff, you can also, there are throttling mechanisms, if you will, with the overall participatory cap, for example. So you may want to start with a program that's rather small, maybe just 1 or 2 megawatts, which may be just 1 or 2 projects. And then over time, as you gain comfort with the nature of the supply from those projects, you build up net surplus and reserves so that you've got your financial legs under you. Then you could grow that program as many other CCAs have as they move into their, you know, second and third year of operation. So that's a very easy program to scale. And I think you can also, over time, adjust the pricing mechanisms to make sure you stay current with what the energy value is. And then, you know, define what the premium is relative to the value of that power on the open market to cover the costs of, say, developing a project locally, which may well be more expensive than it is, say, in the Central Valley. So I think those programs that are customer funded, again, coming back to that concept, those are programs that you can typically offer right from the get-go. So 100% renewable, net energy metering, The community solar or local solar program, that would be one where it's not necessarily available from day one because you wouldn't have a project to point to. So this might be a project that, say, is supported by your feed-in tariff. And once it's developed, you could carve out a section of that project or the entirety of the project, depending on subscribership, and say, this project is earmarked for these customers. And here's the associated rate if you want to have your supply exclusively sourced from this particular project. And then some of the other items, there's a consideration regarding both funding to get the program up and running, as well as the administrative burden. So, energy efficiency is a perfect example where you would likely need to have your own staff that would be administering this program, and or some sort of third party, consulting type arrangement with a very experienced firm in that regard to make sure that you're doing all of the different things that the CPUC would require of you as part of taking the funding to offer those programs. So there are measurement requirements, reporting requirements, and in order to get that stuff done, you just need to make sure you've got the right folks for the job. So I think I've highlighted a few of those items that you want to make sure you line up, and some of them will come with the rate setting process and the feed-in tariff. We can talk about that as time permits.
Can I just ask you one question on the microgrids? You said that there was grant opportunities. Do we need to look at when we might need to apply for those, or anything like that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks for, go ahead.
Barbara. Yeah, go ahead, Barbara.
As I say, yeah, we will monitor the grant opportunities through the California Energy Commission. I can also reach out to some of the partners that I know have worked with other CCAs in these grant projects and let them know there's interest, and to keep us in mind and bring forward ideas to present to the board and for potential projects and programs. So it's just, some of it's getting the word out to say, we're interested in innovation and local development, local programs, and so that we'll probably hear from the folks that work on those grant opportunities.
Great, thank you.
So I'm actually, maybe we should zero in and get a little narrower. Is there anything on this matrix or from what we've heard today that we would like to eliminate at this point? One of the things that concerns me is that we just sort of, boards might just generally agree with certain things, and we don't narrow the focus. So I want to make sure that we're narrowing the focus for our staff and for our work, so that we're not so general that things get lost in the mix. Does that make sense? Like, do we want to zero in on the building decarbonization and electrification right now and for the next 5 years? Do we want to, we talked a little bit about the electric vehicle and charging incentives. Is that something that we want to take on, or do we believe that there are sufficient programs that are out there already that we can pull the focus towards something else? There's something on here that was plumber electrician training, which we didn't talk about, but that may be something we can pull off. I just want to make sure that we're not overly broad with our interests.
I'm just wondering if maybe we can keep this chart, but I didn't realize that it went from the most common to the uncommon, and I like that. My feeling would be I would like to move the electric vehicle and charging incentives up above the community grants, and then just realize that like the bottom 5 are for future, and we're not requiring any staff time or anything for those right now. Does that make sense? Or would you like to take those other ones off the table right now?
I had one comment on that, if I may.
Certainly.
The hot water heater and the heat pump incentives, just to keep in mind that I think SDG&E does have a program for this. I don't know that we necessarily need to match every program that SDG&E has, but to just be sensitive to when we take something off the list, being aware of what customers who stay with CEA might be losing by doing that. I mean, I think that all the things they're going to gain will far outweigh it, but I just want to be sensitive to that as we take things off the list. And I think that is one that could come off the list right now. I don't see it as nearly as important as some of these other issues that we should focus our resources on.
Yeah. Ms. Boswell?
So if I could summarize what I heard consistent is we definitely want to work on bringing forward a net energy metering program and 100% renewable product offerings at launch. And there's definite interest in the local solar, community solar program that we can look at how we move forward with that. And those were the three that were consistently seem to be at the top.
Okay.
And the others, I think, are things we know are there should opportunities arise or it become a higher priority for the board.
Okay,
Does
I
that
appreciate.
sound consistent with?
Yeah,
I want to make sure I captured the direction.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that's important for us to get clear on. And I also want to check in with my colleagues about Mr. Dussel actually gave us a little bit more information about the feed-in tariff. Is this information that we would like to request more information around?
Yes.
Okay, so if we could also receive more information about that so that we have a very clear picture of how that can support one of the things that we all agreed that we would like to continue to pursue, which is the local solar retail and potentially storage attached to that. And with that is very clear, and I appreciate us being able to loop back around with that to get very clear on that, so that we can have a clear understanding moving forward. So thank you very much. I think we're good with that portion of the conversation. And Ms. Boswell, if you want to take us into the next set. Of discussion points, which is I think it was the Citizen Advisory Committee portion.
Yeah, let me go back to screen sharing here and back to the presentation. Okay, do you see the slide Citizen Advisory Committee?
Yes.
Okay, I'll take that as a yes. I'm not seeing the list, so I can't see you.
Okay, yes, we
so
can
the
see
next, thank you very much. So the next item for the board's consideration is the discussion and consideration of developing the Citizen Advisory Committee policy. Our JPA agreement, section 5.9, provides the board's authority to establish advisory committees. The committees are to assist the board in implementing and operating the CCA program. And the board establishes the committee's purpose and scope, membership criteria, and rules, regulations, policies, and procedures that govern the committees. Board alternates may sit on committees and may also chair committees. Some possible Citizen Advisory Committee purposes that the board may want to consider. Of course, there's others as well, but two recent discussions were having a Citizen Advisory Committee that assisted with community outreach and public information with regards to Clean Energy Alliance and our upcoming launch. Also are the recent discussion with regards to Clean Energy Alliance expansion and bringing in new partners to join Clean Energy Alliance. Membership criteria to consider for committee members. Again, board or alternates may participate on committees. The board would want to consider the number of committee appointees from each member agency, whether they want to consider the resident or versus business or resident and business representation on the committee, and the length or term of the committee, or the length of term the appointees sit on the committee. So we're looking for board direction with regards to developing and bringing back a Citizen Advisory Committee policy to the board for approval, and direction with regards to establishing a Citizen Advisory Committee when the board sees is the appropriate time to establish the committee, and the purpose and scope with regards to the Citizen Advisory Committees. And that does complete my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Boswell. And Board Member Becker, we'll start with you this time. Any questions, comments?
I do not have any questions.
Okay, and Board Member Haviland?
I don't have questions, but did you say you wanted feedback on it at this point?
Yeah, we can do comments as well.
Okay. Let's see. So could we get the slide up with the questions just to help organize the thoughts? But some of the things that weren't on the slide were, you know, I think it's important that our committees are Brown Act compliant. Whether or not financial disclosures are required to be on a citizen committee, I think will depend on how we define the scope of the committee. So I'm not sure if that's going to be a requirement at this point. I think it's important we get regional representation on the committees, but also that we make room for certain skill sets. So maybe a certain minimum number from each city, and then a few positions that are more skill related than geography related, I think is something to consider. I think having our a committee help us with community outreach is going to be really important. I hope that's one of the first things a citizen advisory committee can do. It's going to be interesting as we get closer to launch to see what our options are going to be for outreach. And so having an engaged committee could really help us with that. And then the CEA expansion piece of it, I think we talked about having board members maybe divvy up the different stakeholder, possible people who could join our CEA, and have a coordinated effort to communicate to those entities. I think that's worth exploring. I think, Barbara, you were maybe at our next meeting, we're going to come back with some suggestions on that. So maybe that's not what we're going to be talking about now. And I also think that whether it's part of a citizen advisory committee or at some point a separate committee, but an independent oversight for risk management, I think will be important to the Clean Energy Alliance at some point. People who have expertise in CEAs who can, you know, give us some oversight, I think is going to be important. And so when to establish, I think that's got to happen maybe a few months before launch so that we can take advantage of the citizens to help us get out and promote our programs. And between now and then, get more clearly defined how we want what we want these committees to consist of and what their goals and missions are. So those are my initial thoughts.
Thank you very much. Board Member Becker, did you have thoughts?
Yes, and I really appreciate those comments from Board Member Haviland, and I do agree we're probably going to need to start with the community outreach to help us to have a plan to get this done. And I had also made a note that the CEA expansion, I don't believe should be a citizen committee. I would like to have, I think it's great that we could use maybe our alternate board members or any of our board members for that, as well as staff. I think those two groups are would be a little bit more effective for this because they've got the relationships with other council members and the people that we would need to talk to. So I don't see that as a citizen advisory committee. And I do agree a finance and risk management advisory committee would be something I would be interested in having as well. And the timing on that, I am not sure that it's right now, but coming up, I guess. And I would like to have, actually, that's a good point, to have some skilled, I would like community members to be involved, but I would also like to have maybe one position of some expertise on those. So I don't know if we could get that through the application process, but, and I guess I was thinking maybe 2 community members from each city for the committee and then a board member for what that would look like. And I
So
think-
three appointees each.
No, I meant to say 2 appointees each. So
Okay. I thought it might have been 2 appointees plus an alternate. So it would be a total of 3, which is actually interesting.
what I guess what I'm saying is I feel like each of us from each city should be able to pick 2 people. Is that what you were saying? And then what do you mean by the alternate?
Well, almost as though each city would have 3 appointees to a 9-person citizen advisory committee. So it would be each of our alternates and then 2 additional from each chosen by each board member.
Okay. I'm wondering if we might want to split up our alternates though, if we have more than one committee. Or you're saying you want three board members on each of these committees?
I don't think that's possible.
He's on.
Yeah,
mute.
so one thing we can't do is on a committee, you can't create a quorum, so you end up having the committee turned into a board grouping. So you could have individual board member, and but you could not have 2 or 3 board members on a committee.
So it was just the alternates that I was speaking of. So the board members choose 2 appointees, and then their alternate also serves, so that each board member has 3 representatives from each city. Does that make sense? There's a total of 9, each one of the alternates, and then.
But that creates a quorum, he's saying, in that committee. So
Yeah,
with the alternates.
Yeah, possibly there. And I've looked at that before. I just had to go back on my review of that, but that could be potentially, because each of the 3 alternates can serve as a board member, that could also create a quorum problem with the
I see.
alternates. Yeah.
Okay.
Could I clarify something just for consideration? For the committee members that weren't part of the allocation per city, we could use those additional slots to come from any part of our CEA territory, but targeted on a certain expertise. So that way we would have, there may be more citizens from Carlsbad or Solana Beach or Del Mar, but each city would have a representative. And then we could also have someone with expertise in something that the committee's working on, be a member of the committee as well, and make those slots more targeted to the expertise than to the particular city.
Certainly.
So I was throwing that out there for consideration.
yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I like that as well. So when we're looking at the need to populate the advisory committee, is there the feeling of a need to have an odd number, or is an even number sufficient?
I think an odd number would be important.
Yeah, so potentially an alternate, one of our alternates would serve as a chair, and then you'd have 2 representatives chosen by each of the board members.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that definitely would work to work in an alternate in that way.
Okay.
So have a 7-person committee?
Yeah.
And what do you think about the concept of 1 or 2 ex officio, or even possibly a voting board member who may have a certain expertise we would want on that committee?
Well, thinking about the community outreach committee, we don't really need any expertise on that one per se. I mean, do we agree on that? And so I definitely think with the finance and risk management, that might be nice, but I'm wondering if just even in the process of choosing from your own applications, you might find that those are people that are volunteering or for that finance and risk management have that expertise, and those are the people that you would choose. And
So I
then-
just want to take a couple steps back. I think what I'm hearing is, are you thinking, Ms. Becker, that each one of these constitutes an individual council or individual committee? Because I think what we're talking about is the scope of work of one single committee.
Oh, okay, could tackle all of these?
I
All
think
of-
that's what I think that's what we're trying to see, how much, what is the scope of work of one single citizen advisory committee?
Yeah, the one thing I would, just based on some experiences with other CCAs, I do think there could be a distinction here between the Citizens Committee versus one that's very specialized, such as finance and risk management. And in general, what we have seen is that the more specialized type of committee will be tend to be separate apart from a Citizens Advisory Committee. And again, you can do it any number of different ways, and you can make that Citizens Advisory Committee all encompassing. But there can be times when you want to take a look at the type of expertise you want to bring in, and that may be a different skill set than a more general Citizens Advisory Committee.
Okay, and then just process question two. We had requested, I think, a community. I think where the confusion is coming in a little bit here is the board had actually requested a committee to tackle outreach, and I think the understanding was that it was going to be on this agenda. It's not, so I think we would have to agendize. We would have to actually agendize the more specific committees. Correct? Yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
Well, that makes our decision today a lot easier.
Okay. Ms. Boswell.
Chair Schumacher, I do have scheduled for the next meeting on May 21st, to bring back to the board the CEA outreach matrix that was spoken about, the subcommittee. It was spoken of in terms of a subcommittee, but where we look at assigning specific potential new partners we want to speak to and assign staff for the board. That will be at the 21st.
Perfect. Thank you for that clarification. And then with that, would my colleagues like to add a more specialized type of committee to that, or do we want to try to at first tackle the finance and risk component as a specialized skill set within the community advisory or the citizen advisory committee right now? And potentially what we can do is we can add that as a skill set, and then if we find later on down the line that we'd like to break it out as a separate subcommittee when we're a little bit more grounded in our work with some surplus funds and maybe a larger staff, start to think about expanding that outward.
I think that's a good way to start.
But just have one committee, citizens committee for those. I just see that I do see the finance and risk management is completely different to me than community outreach, but you're right. So maybe when we need to branch out, we'll do that later. So.
But I think it might be really important for us to make sure that one of those seats is with somebody who has a very in-depth understanding of risk management and finance, maybe an auditor, somebody who practices auditing, for instance, might be a good skill set to bring on board for the committee.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so to loop back around, at this point, are we good with the 7 members? So one alternate, which we can choose, and then each one of us would choose 2.
Yes.
Okay, and then now looping into skill sets. Do you want to? I don't want for us to duplicate, and so do we want to assign each of the cities a skill set along with a geographical or a geographic assignment, or how would you like to work that with the skill set additions?
I think if we're going to look for a specialized skill set, like, someone with a finance or an auditing background, I don't know that it would make sense to put that on one particular city. Um,
Was that, yeah, I agree. I don't think that's a good idea. So I don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
Ad hoc member or two who could join this committee of 7. And I know you don't want to get too unwieldy with the size of your committees, but I wouldn't want to limit that level of expertise to just one geography, I think.
Right. Ms. Boswell, do you have a suggestion?
Yes, and maybe a clarification. So I'm hearing potentially 2 different types of committees. Typically, a finance and risk management committee is an ongoing committee that is for the life of the CCA, whereas a citizen advisory committee might be more limited in time. And Greg, I'd be interested in maybe hearing your thoughts with regards to a finance and risk management committee, what typically how those are structured, because those do require, members or appointees that may have specific skill sets.
Well, Ms. Boswell, before we dig into that, I think what I'm hearing from my colleagues is that we would discuss a finance and risk assessment committee further down the road. And what we're now talking about is a particular type of skill set that would be incorporated within the initial citizen advisory committee. So we've come to a consensus that right now a specialized committee is not something that we're looking at. So I just wanted to be clear before we spend more time on that.
Okay, well, my mistake. I thought we were discussing potentially another specific committee. So sorry about that.
It does seem that we're sort of blending 2 things. And so I'm not super comfortable with that we are blending, talking about, well, we're going to look for an accountant, but then I do kind of see that the community outreach committee would have a purpose at the beginning, but probably wouldn't be needed after a while. So I do kind of see a difference now of start with this community outreach, public information type of a citizens group, and then and then just have a separate finance and risk management. I just feel like there's 2 different people. Someone who is an auditor might not be someone who wants to do the community outreach part.
Sure. So maybe we should, and I completely recognize that, but maybe it would be good for us to just take a couple steps back and talk about the scope of work, the purpose of this particular committee, since this is what is on the agenda. And what we can do is we can focus on the Citizens Advisory Committee, what its scope of work is. And then if we find that there are some other scopes of work that are outside of the scope that we decide upon, then we can put on a future agenda a discussion about a committee that would fulfill that purpose. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So for the purposes of the Citizen Advisory Committee, the examples of some of the areas of work that it could zero in on include community outreach. It includes development of public information. It includes some finance and risk management or the expansion of the CEA. Those are just some examples that we were given. But one of the things I think is really important is feedback on social equity, for instance, community members who may be low income, what programs would be helpful to them. The community outreach portion is just an education piece. So with a citizen advisory committee, it's for me, it's the purpose of their work initially is how we can incorporate sort of a larger intelligence base, knowledge base, to help our decision making in the initial steps of forming the 5-year, forming the goals and the vision and the programs, and to give us some feedback on that.
Yeah, one thing if I could add right now is that I think what is more effective is when the board defines what the topics are that the Citizens Advisory Committee is going to discuss. Because one thing that's happened in some cases is that if it's not directed as to the topics to be addressed, the committee can get off on a track different than the board. So that's why I think it is very helpful for the board here to define specifically what topics they will address. And that could change over time, and that could evolve over time. That'd be my recommendation.
Thank you.
I'd be interested in hearing some other topics and things that other maybe other CCAs have found to be really helpful, that their citizen committees have really been helpful in doing for them. I mean, I just don't know all the different areas that might be explored. Do we have any suggestions? Because I'm just, I don't exactly know what I would like the scope of the citizens committee to do for us.
So I think one of the things that I would really love their help with is being able to get a perspective from our lower income group of folks who are going to be impacted by some of the programs that we put together. I would like a skill set that is from the energy sector that works in these spaces, to have the ability to tap in to their expertise. I'd be interested in some of the energy development side. So somebody who has information and works in a space with solar, for instance, solar rooftop. So it's basically the community portion of things, and then the skill sets that even with the programs that we're talking about, so that we can run the programs by them, by the Citizens Advisory Committee. See if we're hitting all of the goals that we want to hit as far as equity, as far as innovative programs, connections to innovative the innovative sectors, the energy sectors.
I think another piece that would be important for this committee to look at some point is just monitoring climate action plans and how the Clean Energy Alliance is helping the cities to achieve their climate action plans. There's programs that maybe an individual cities doing on their own, it might be more efficient to bring up to the Clean Energy Alliance, assuming it's also one of our top goals. And I think a Citizens Advisory Committee would be tuned into that.
So one of the things I think would be really helpful for the Citizens Advisory Committee to do as well is, as we're talking about our strategic plan, that they would be a part of helping us to fully scope it out, and then also be a part of the potentially an annual review process for the strategic plan, and inviting them to really dig into the analysis and helping with the refinement of those strategic plans. So that's what I can imagine an advisory committee would, as far as the scope of work.
Yeah, agreed.
Barb, are you aware of any other important factors that we might have overlooked of citizen committees?
I'm not for where we currently are at with our program and looking at moving towards implementation. I think that what's been mentioned in terms of purpose, I think hits on the priorities of where we are, what the board may be seeking input from as they move forward in developing the program.
Okay. So then possibly what we can do then is, as we're thinking about the purpose, I would love to put together the advisory committee sooner rather than later to help us with the strategic plan, for instance. because I think that's a really, really important piece of our work. It's sort of the business plan of the CEA. And I agree with Board Member Haviland, needs to be Brown Act compliant. I think Form 700s are absolutely necessary, the conflict of interest forms. And then I think when we ourselves request applications for appointment, then we can bring our top picks to a meeting, and we can discuss as board members who we've thought about, have some options, and then when the options are presented to each one of us, we can talk through what is a good mix. So together as a board, we can say, okay, here's a representative. Oh, it looks like we're duplicating that. So which one do we want to put into place with that same skill set? I imagine that kind of negotiating for the positions might happen in a transparent way. How does that sound?
Yeah, I like that.
Okay.
I like that.
So then a composition of 7 members, we'll choose one of our alternates. So we'll have a democratic process about which one of the alternates we think would be best fit. And then each, with an application process, we'll have folks who will apply with each one of us individually. And then we can bring our top picks to a meeting. So we'll have one of the agenda items be just the composition of the advisory committee. And we'll just have a big old conversation about the composition of that committee.
Mm-hmm.
And we might want to ask our alternates if they're even interested first.
Certainly.
Yes.
Yeah.
There may not be a decision to make.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
And then that's a good point. Then if there's not an alternate that wants to chair that, then potentially I don't know how you'd want to work it, but there would be one additional member that would need to be chosen. So which one of us would have that third option would be the conversation.
Application together.
We're just gonna have to convince one of our alternates to chair it. Okay, so checking back in with staff, does staff feel like the purpose of the Citizens Advisory Committee is clear enough at this point? Oh, sorry, Barbara, you're on mute.
There, am I back? If I can take a moment to go through the purpose as I heard it and make sure that I've captured everything. I have on my list social equity, assist with formulating the 5-year goals, perspective of lower income, and make sure that that our programs and projects are hitting the low income, our priorities with regards to low income, and providing innovative programs and projects. Skill sets from the energy sector, and we can tap into their expertise. Look at our energy development, local solar and rooftop programs, and running the programs by the Citizen Advisory Committee. Have to be a part of the strategic planning process, and envisioning playing a role in an annual review of how we're hitting our targets with regards to our strategic plan and the action items in that plan. There was discussion about the committee also assisting with community outreach. I'm not sure that I heard consensus that was to be part of it. So can I get clarification with that?
Yes, I think outreach and education was part of it. Was that everyone's?
Yeah.
Okay.
Chair Schumacher on board, did I capture?
Yes. Yes. So I think that's the community outreach and development of public information piece. So they would be a part of the marketing strategy.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then Board Member Haviland also mentioned making sure that we're on target with our each of our city's
Yes.
climate action plans.
Yeah, sorry. I have that on here.
Okay.
And then in terms of the makeup, we're looking at 2 appointees from each of the, each board member has 2 appointees from their respective cities, plus an alternate would chair. There would be an application process. And then the board would bring their top picks to the board at large to discuss and look at comparing the skill sets being brought.
Perfect.
And based on where we're at, I can bring the policy and draft policy to the June meeting. Would that meet your?
Wonderful.
Okay.
Does that sound good to my colleagues, June?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And would that agenda item also include the application process, so we'd be able to approve all of that? Okay, great, wonderful.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. All right, excellent. So go ahead and move on to the next portion of our agenda, or the next subset of our agenda, which is the strategic plan.
Thank you, Chair Schumacher. The next item is consideration of a strategic plan. Strategic plans are a place to document and establish the direction and goals of Clean Energy Alliance. It looks at where are we as an organization? Where do we want to go? It's a place to record our organization's mission, vision, and values, and also establishes long-term goals, but not just goals, but action plans that we will undertake to achieve those goals. Our process we did today, the 5-year goals and vision process, is a good starting point for the strategic plan. And how the strategic plan can help us is with regards to then developing the actual action plan for meeting our goals. I open it up now for board discussion and direction with regards to considering development of a strategic plan.
Thank you, Ms. Boswell. And let's see, Ms. Becker, Ms. Haviland, who would like to go first? I can see you, so
I'm happy to go first.
Go ahead, Ms. Haviland.
So obviously, I think we all decided from our committee discussion, we do want to have a strategic action plan. So I would like to get going on that sooner rather than later, but to be realistic about how much time and resources we have to commit to this right now. I think this could be a really good opportunity for us to set a framework in place that will both maybe attract new members and give people considering our JPA a good view of what they would be working with if they were to join our JPA. So I think it's really important that we get that going. I just want to be realistic with the amount of resources we're going to have to commit to this right now. And glad we're going to have a committee to help us through this at some point.
Wonderful. Ms. Becker?
Yes, I'm in agreement with all that. I don't have much to add. I haven't done the research on other strategic plans, but I'm open to looking at that. I really am so interested in exploring the areas where we can explore the local renewable energy products. And so anyway, that's probably all I have. Thank you.
Okay. Really appreciate that. I have ex parte, I have done research on, I spent a little time looking through some of the business plans / strategic plans that are out there. And I did land upon the East Bay Community Energy Local Development Business Plan. And a couple highlights from that. This is something that they put together in 2018, and you can, what I'll do is I'll share this with Ms. Boswell. It's a PDF so that she can send it over to the other board members, and then also add it to the public record so that the public can also look at it. But I wanted to highlight a couple of things that are in that just as chapters. You have section 1, which is early actions for local development. Section 2 being supporting resources, policies, and strategies. Section 3 is an ongoing analysis, implementation, and refinement, and also an implementation timeline. So it really reflects back this idea of us putting something together for the first possibly 5 years, and then being able to revisit it annually, make sure that we're on target, make sure that we're hitting make sure we're fulfilling the expectations, and then also being able to make it an iterative process with our citizen advisory committee and with our public. So with the acknowledgement that we need to give the direction to staff to pursue a strategic plan, I also wanted to take this opportunity to say how impressed I was at the East Bay Community Energy's strategic plan, or what they call their business plan, and just encourage my colleagues to take a look at it. I think it's really important for us to set the expectations and hold ourselves accountable to hitting the guideposts that we set.
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay, so I'll send that over to Ms. Boswell so she can share it with everybody. Thank you. And we'll go ahead and move on to the next portion of our meeting, which is the Inclusive Sustainable Workforce Policy.
Thank you, Chair Schumacher. I will go back to, there we go. So the current item for the board to consider is establishing an inclusive sustainable workforce policy. The policy would establish business practices and procedures related to hiring, contracting, procurement, and program and project development. The policy can identify preferences or specific criteria related to hiring and workforce requirements. Peninsula Clean Energy has an inclusive sustainable workforce policy, which was included as an attachment for the board's review and information with regards to a sample CCA, in an inclusive sustainable workforce policy. So with that, I will turn it back over to Chair Schumacher for board discussion and direction.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Boswell, and love to hear some feedback from my colleagues. And I can see you, so whoever gets their hand up first, I'll. Ms. Becker.
Well, yes, I mean, I love this idea. I know that all CCAs have been, they have a strong track record of this, and I'm definitely in favor of it. But what I want to make sure is since we're so new, I just don't want to limit the fair and open competition for projects parts. So I just want to be sensitive to that. And just in these early stages, I would say, but I am in favor of this. I've read through the Peninsula Clean Energy, and there's a lot of good language. I just don't want to set up any kind of, and I guess maybe I can ask this, that we're not setting up any kind of legal liability language in anything that we're doing. Would that be a fair statement?
We're going to make sure that doesn't happen. So
Okay.
I take a look at the policy from a PCE, and we'll be taking a closer look at what we bring to the board. So that's also, there was an issue raised between some conflict between language in the PCE plan versus what's in our JPA agreement with regards to open competition. So obviously we'd have to have language that's consistent with our recitals within our own JPA agreement.
Okay, that's what I would want to be careful of. And I do just want to say we're still at the point where we want to be soliciting other partners. And so I want to be really inclusive of the different cities that might be joining us. And so when we talk about also local things, are we making sure that is that all of SDG&E territory? We're not talking about local, just local cities, I'm imagining, because I'd like to broaden that just in case we do have other cities join us. And I'm hoping that that would be okay. That means local to everybody. Those are my initial thoughts.
Thank you, Ms. Becker. Ms. Haviland?
Yes, the definition of local was also on my list to define here. And I am generally very supportive of having a sustainable workforce policy. I just want to understand the timing of it and want to make sure that we're not taking on too much too soon. But would be very interested in having staff bring back a proposal that's consistent with our JPA agreement. Based on the template that was in the example that was in our board packet. It had a lot of good programs in it, and I would like to see it customized to what we're doing and get some feedback on what the right timing of this would be. But I am also supportive of the concept. And the other question that comes up when we talk about this is, how would this pertain to our current consultants? Is this just a policy moving forward? So just another thing that you don't necessarily have to answer right now, but I think would be important for us to understand if once we're looking at a draft policy for our JPA.
Okay. I appreciate the comments from my colleagues, and just a quick question. I know that this was something that Ms. Becker brought up, but the current language within the PCE, their workforce policy, is there anything in there currently that seems to conflict with our recital 6F?
Yes,
So
there is. I'll take a closer look at this. There is a potential conflict between the language that was highlighted by Mayor Hall and in a letter that we had in that hall that was given to the board. So that is one that we're going to have to take a closer look at before this comes back to you for any type of adoption.
I did not see that letter. Was that to everybody?
I thought it was. I'm pretty sure it was directed to the board, but
okay, if the other board members received it, I will take a look. Thank you.
I received it.
What day did you receive it? Do you know?
It was emailed out to everyone yesterday.
yes.
And I also have it to read into the record. It was requested to be read into the record.
Oh, perfect.
Well, why don't we go ahead and Ms. Cobian, if you don't mind reading that into the record now so that we're on the same page. Thank you. And then if you do have any additional public comment, then on this item, we'll go ahead and hear it now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, funny, my headset just cut out just then. So, okay. Dear CEA Joint Powers Authority Board of Directors, I would like to bring to your attention the conflict between the Clean Energy Alliance Joint Powers Agreement effective November 4th, 2019, Recital 6F, and what is now stated within the Peninsula Clean Energy Sustainable Workforce Policy, as currently defined under PCE owned generation projects, PCE feed-in tariff price projects, and PCE energy efficiency projects. This is my recommendation. The highlighted paragraphs from the Peninsula Clean Energy under the Inclusive and Sustainable Workforce Policy are in direct conflict with 6F of the original recitals. This language will create hurdles with other future agencies and that cannot be overcome. The recital 6F language was agreed upon by the current CEA members and potential members who we have been in conversations with over the past year. After conversations with the San Diego County Board of Supervisors and 6 other cities, the language in Recital 6F was agreeable. It is my strong recommendation that any language different than what is stated in Recital 6F be eliminated. Recital 6F, pursue the procurement of local generation of renewable power developed by or within member jurisdictions with an emphasis on local jobs where appropriate without limiting fair and open competition for projects or programs implemented by the authority. The language being discussed today within the Peninsula Clean Energy Sustainable Workforce Policy. PCE-owned generation projects. Any PCE-owned renewable development project shall use local businesses, union labor, and apprenticeship programs through multi-trade agreements and or through multiple agreements for work. Each construction contractor or subcontractor performing work or on any PCE-owned project shall use a combination of local labor, union labor, and apprenticeship programs, and shall follow fair compensation practices, including proper assignment of work to crafts that traditionally perform the work. For each renewable energy project, PCE or its construction contractor shall require of its regular workforce that at least 50% of all journey level employees shall be graduates of a city of or state of California approved apprenticeship program, and at least 20% shall be enrolled and participating in a local state of California approved apprenticeship program. Apprenticeship programs must be approved by the State Department of Apprenticeship Standards. PCE feed-in tariff price projects. PCE shall use best efforts to ensure each construction contractor or subcontractor performing work on any PCE feed-in tariff project utilize local businesses, union labor, multi-trade agreement, apprenticeship programs, and fair compensation practices, including proper assignment of work to crafts that traditionally perform the work. PCE energy efficiency projects. PCE shall use best efforts to support local businesses, union labor, and local apprenticeship programs in the implementation of its energy efficiency programs. PCE shall use best efforts to ensure each construction contractor or subcontractor performing work on any PCE energy efficiency program utilizes local businesses, union labor, local apprenticeship, and fair compensation practices in program implementation, including proper assignment of work to crafts that traditionally perform the work. Sincerely, Matt Hall, Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Copian. Did you have any other public comment that needed to be read into the record for this item?
Yes, actually I do. You want me to go ahead with those?
Yeah, I think now's the time. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Dear Board of Directors, I would like to know more about the Citizen Advisory Committee. What will be the duties of the members? What will be the qualification for members? How will members be selected? How does one apply? I would assume that such a committee would be able to advise on all aspects of the CCA, technical, logistical, financial, outreach, etc. As such, members would have to represent experience in all of these fields, though each member would have an area of expertise. Applicants would have to be reviewed and interviewed, and a consensus of the board would prevail in a selection. An application could be as simple as submitting a resume. I expect to be listening on the upcoming meeting and hearing the thoughts of the board. Thank you for this very important service. Sincerely, Greg Ferry. The Carlsbad Sierra Club team has been working for 5 years to ensure the creation of the CCE in an effort to combat climate change. CEA will immediately give the ratepayer better options and a choice to opt up to 100% clean energy. This is a time to rethink how we can optimize and tailor our unique CEA programs for our energy production and usage. As you start planning for the future procurement of clean energy, we'd like you to consider the following, as always, to benefit our local communities and work towards social equity. Community battery storage for grid resiliency and to offset higher peak usage times. Community solar programs that allow renters and low usage customers to buy small shares of PV installations. Lower income participants can get sliding scale adjustments. EV charging at work that is billed back to the ratepayer's home to take advantage of peak PV output during the day. Incentivize electric and plug-in hybrid vehicle purchases through our local dealerships. Energy audits and rebates to homeowners and commercial businesses for purchases of new energy-saving appliances such as induction ranges and heat pump water heaters. Thank you for your hard work on moving toward a more sustainable future. Mike McMahon on behalf of the Carlsbad MyGen Sierra Club team. In seeking both local projects and working toward greater social equity, I'd like the CEA board to consider community solar. This type of program can lead to greater equity for renters and lower income community members by crafting a community solar program that enables customers to check an extra box on their CEA power bill that adds a small additional fee. That fee is used to buy shares in new medium-scale solar projects built in the service community by the CEA and local labor. As consumers accumulate shares, their power fees are offset using virtual net metering and their bills go down. Their solar projects could include arrays built on leased commercial rooftops or solar canopies built over leased parking lots. They can be continually funded and expanded through the on-the-bill purchasing program, keeping the CEA's ownership minimal. The CEA could also choose to do the same with community electric storage. This will enable more community members to benefit from owning the infrastructure while they help to protect our environment and invest in our community. Financiers can attest that solar investments have a strong return. Locally sited community solar can help fill in all the spaces that are missing solar here in our cities and share in making power cleaner and cheaper for everyone. Thank you, Paige DeCino, Carlsbad resident. Last comment. Given the low cost of solar power and the ever decreasing prices, why would it cost more to have 100% renewable energy these days? Actual project prices suggest otherwise. From Dr. Phil Watts. That's the last one.
Thank you, Ms. Cobian. And my apologies. I should have asked for that. My apologies to my colleagues. I should have asked for that at the very beginning of the item. So I'll make sure I do better on that next time. So thank you. So we'll loop back around, and everybody's on the same page with Mayor Hall's comments. He's concerned about the recital 6F. It sounds like Ms. Becker is as well. And Mr. Stepanisic, can you just be clear about what language in particular would be problematic for the recital?
What's in conflict is between the language in our recitals that speaks in terms of open competition versus the language in PCE's rules here that would require union labor and also requires that a certain percentage of workers have been trained on state apprenticeship programs. So there's language in there that's more akin to a project labor agreement, and that's not the intent of our recitals. So that's there's some other parts of what was read to you that's okay, but those are the key points that are problematic.
And just, I agree with because the first paragraph, the language is shall use, as opposed to the second two paragraphs are use best efforts. And so
Right.
legally, yeah. I do see that there is a difference.
There is, yeah. And I think that's where we just need to parse through that language there. And again, make sure it is consistent with our language in our recital.
So once that gets reviewed and it would be brought back to us, then it's my understanding, though, that at a project level, we wouldn't be able to bar project labor agreements, and we wouldn't also be able to require project labor agreements. So either way, recital 6F cannot, on a project by project basis, prevent us from pursuing the very things that could be imagined in this inclusive and sustainable workforce policy. Correct. So there's the possibility of language being added to that effect, that recital 6F does not bar or does not prevent the use of this type of what we're contemplating within the policy from assessment on a project by project basis.
Yeah, and that was really the thinking that also was being debated, was to avoid having anything that would imply or require that there has to be project labor agreements, but it would be done on a case-by-case basis, which under state law is how these should be approached in any event. So yes, hearing your comments here today, that we'll have again take a look at how we redefine this language to, on one hand, be consistent with recital, but also leave your options open as to how you may look at individual projects down the road.
Right, because this could essentially be a further tailoring, and that was the point of the policy. From my understanding, it was a further tailoring of an inclusive and sustainable workforce. Whereas recital 6F is rather general. What we want are some very specific goals that kind of lay out a policy of what eligibility would look like when we're thinking of the types of projects that we're contemplating within the strategic plan. And so what for me, what I'm looking for is a more narrowed focus given the recital, but a policy that lays out really what we would be looking at in contemplating in parallel with what is being brought back through the strategic plan and the programs that we're thinking about, right? So there's the eligibility language. So to be eligible to apply for being a partner in the implementation, the development, of the projects and the programs that we're talking about, you know, we need to be able to, I think, narrow the eligibility requirements is what I imagine the policy to mean.
Okay. All right.
Love feedback from my colleagues on that.
I am not comfortable with narrowing anything right now. These types of things are way down the road, these projects, and I guess just today I'm not comfortable trying to narrow that right now, but I'm interested to see what comes from this. But yeah, I just don't see that there would be any need to do that right now.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Haviland, any thoughts? Any other thoughts?
So I share Board Member Becker's concern, but I'm open to taking a look at a draft policy and trying to put context around it as to how a specific policy would relate to projects that we are looking at pursuing down the road. And so I think it'd be helpful to have a draft policy to look at and some context to put it in.
Okay.
The idea of limiting things doesn't sound like something I would be interested in unless I better understand exactly what it is we're limiting. If we're limiting things that we didn't really want anyway and didn't want to pursue, then I'm, you know, obviously not going to have a problem with that.
Okay, excellent. So I guess we can send this back to staff, and there can be sort of a conversation between our recital 6F and the PCE policy, and we can see what comes of that. Is everybody comfortable with that? And then can come back to the board after it's been analyzed.
Sounds good.
Okay. Ms. Boswell.
Can I check in with you with regards to timing? Would July work based on what we have going for the next meeting and the June meeting with regards to budget and financing and the Citizen Advisory Committee? I think July would be workable if that timing works for the chair and the board.
So the Citizens Advisory Committee, not June, but July, and then this policy July as well. Is that what you were saying?
No, we are bringing the Citizen Advisory Committee policy back in June.
Okay.
Yeah, we
And
had
then
that slated
for this,
June,
okay, and then this would be for July.
if that timing works for you and the board.
Works for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be helpful.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, great. All right. I appreciate that very much, those conversations. And I think that does it for item 1. And we can quickly move over to item 2 if everybody's comfortable with that.
Yes.
Sounds good. Okay. Ms. Boswell, would you like to introduce us
Yes.
to the Clean Energy Alliance Board policy regarding handling of unsolicited proposals?
Thank you, Chair Schumacher. And the next item for board consideration is seeking direction with regards to developing an unsolicited proposal policy. Clean Energy Alliance currently has on their website an interest form where potential businesses or individuals who would like to do business or participate in request for proposal processes with Clean Energy Alliance can fill out in form and be placed on a list where they are receiving those processes. This policy takes that a step further and provides a venue for a process for individuals or developers who have ideas that they would like to submit to the board for consideration that's outside of the normal solicitation process. The policy should address expectations for how the proposals would be handled by Clean Energy Alliance once submitted, so that those that are submitting it understand how they will be handled and what they can expect with regards to responses. The policy should be developed with consideration with regards to consistent with JPA goals. So you may want to tailor the policy to address projects or programs that would meet, for example, our goals or policies with regards to innovative programs, local development, local programs. And we want to establish an efficient administrative process whereby we can review and respond to them in an effective and efficient manner. We did have a sample policy that was provided to the board, and it's Sandag's unsolicited proposal policy. And I welcome board discussion and questions and direction.
Thank you very much, Ms. Boswell. And any questions and or comments from the board?
Start. I think it's really important that we have a policy in place for this. We do want to encourage innovation, but we also have to make sure we do it in a way that is managing the amount of administrative time that it takes to process proposals that are going to come in. And so I'm wondering if there's a part of a policy, an initial step that vendors could take before submitting a complete proposal to us, a one-page summary or a couple of pages of summarizing what they're hoping to do with us, what sort of partnership they're looking for, or program they're looking for, what the cost would be, and consolidated document, a shorter version of a huge proposal that would give our CEO the ability to maybe get board feedback on ones that look interesting, or weed out proposals that aren't that interesting on first blush, just to streamline this process. So I do think it's important to move forward with the policy, but don't want to open the floodgates and have it take up a lot of our staff time as well. And then I'm also just curious if we have many unsolicited proposals right now that are in consideration.
Ms. Boswell, do you want to answer that question quickly or respond to that before we move on to Ms. Becker?
Sure. We have received interest from a local developer that has a project idea. We did request that he come back with a more specified project, and we're still waiting for that. We've also heard from 2 individuals who are interested in working with Clean Energy Alliance, not necessarily bringing a development project, but one individual is interested in working on community outreach, a consultant type basis, and then someone interested in administrative duties or work with Clean Energy Alliance. So we have had individuals reach out, but I think without a venue, it's not clear how those types of ideas or opportunities are brought forward to Clean Energy Alliance.
Ms. Becker?
So I talked to Ms. Boswell about this, having it be like a one-page initial solicitation would probably be, is that what we could do? Make a policy that it's got to be in a certain form and lay out that form so that it's easier for, I'm assuming, Ms. Boswell, you would take a look at those and then bring them to the board, or is there an alternative? I'm not sure what other alternate process we could have, but I think having it in something that is generic for the first initial solicitation would make it a lot easier on whoever's reviewing this.
Excellent. Ms. Boswell, I'd love to get your, if you're okay with this, get your input on what would be helpful to you when it comes to unsolicited proposals and partnership requests. You being somebody who has to vet a lot of these, I'd love to get your input as well.
Thank you for asking. I think the policy is a good idea because we do value innovation, and frequently the traditional RFP or RFQ process doesn't necessarily lend itself to innovation with regards to what we're trying to achieve. I think having a one-page or executive summary of a project to be submitted would be a good idea. I think whether it goes to myself or myself on the board, I would look to the board for direction with regards to whether they would like to have those proposals come to them as well, so they can look at what's being submitted. I think if the board would like to see it, the policy tailored to where we're, the unsolicited proposals are more related to something that's not in the normal realm of, for example, we will be doing regular solicitations for energy and power, but more something unique or innovative or not wouldn't normally be considered in our normal solicitation process. I think it would make it a very valuable opportunity and streamline it.
Okay. In your experience, when we're talking about something like this and we're talking about innovation, which is clearly we're very interested in that, and we really want to focus in on that as something that's a smaller JPA. We want to be the JPA that is known for our ability to be nimble and innovative and resilient, as was mentioned earlier by Board Member Haviland. That means that we're going to be tackling proprietary data, I would imagine, or proprietary ideas. So would it be good for any policy to also have something in place as far as what we would do in a situation when it comes to that type of information, idea, or data?
I guess I would ask Greg if he might have some thoughts. My initial thoughts would, for an initial, if we were to develop a policy that had the initial step be an executive summary, we likely wouldn't be necessarily being provided proprietary data at that point in the process. Frequently, when you're working with a developer or a consultant or a firm that is wanting to look at innovation or programs, they'll require a non-disclosure agreement to be signed so that those that have access to that proprietary information are bound to not disclose that proprietary information. Greg, do you have?
I think your thought, Barbara, in terms of breaking this down into two parts, where in that first summary is not going to have proprietary information or trade secrets, is probably a good approach. And then if we go beyond that to have a more detailed proposal, we're going to need to then have a non-disclosure agreement and have a definition then of what is proprietary. The problem we run into so often here is we're working with people, they want everything to be proprietary. And therefore we need to be careful that we are being open about what is public information and that the public has a right to see. So, but that is something we end up always negotiating with parties to make sure we're drawing the line at the right spot. But I think this two-step process is a good idea.
Okay. And I appreciate that, because one of the things that I'm struggling with is a one-pager. I think is a really great idea. It's just, I think, as far as steps, some of the things I'm looking at as far as the SANDAG, unsolicited proposals and partnerships requests, I think this is a policy that I feel is too long, but I think one page would probably be too short when we're tackling giving information. What I don't want to do is create a situation where there's more questions than there are answers, and so that also ends up being a burden on staff. So I want to make sure that that we're tackling everything, including that proprietary information, that two-step process that might be there, and the whatever you submit as an executive summary, for instance, would be a part of the public record. But then if we need to follow up, then that's when we might head into a little bit of a different scenario. So I just wanted to be there with that. But
yes, one thing is that Barbara and I talked about was that the SANDAG policy, provided a good reference point, but we want something much simpler than that. That's a very complicated policy. So the concept we have here is to definitely make it a little more readable and simple to work with.
Yes, it is comprehensive.
It is.
And then the other thing is that I think also being very clear in the unsolicited proposals and partnership requests by how a bid might be evaluated, or how an idea or a proposal might be evaluated. So again, this is kind of trying to, given the size of staff, it's trying to get proactive on what information is out there when we've got folks who are interested in partnering up or giving us ideas. And so how a bid or how something might be evaluated might be, like how we might prioritize or scale, use a scale to evaluate the different projects or proposals that might come in. And so I wanted to also say ex parte, I've spent a lot of time on the East Bay Community Energy site. So this is from them again. They do have bid evaluation, how bids and proposals are received through both, I think, competitive solicitation and then possibly unsolicited side of things, and how they're subject to a set of criteria and a scoring system. So without digging too far into that, it's basically setting out sort of a diversity outline, you know, businesses or contractors or vendors that have a certain components. So I thought that would be something as well that would be interesting. Maybe that needs to be added to a future agenda if that's outside of the scope. But just thinking about sort of this, how do we make sure that we're being proactive with our information on our website for potential partners and folks who want to send us their proposals.
Yeah, we're general counsel, and one of my partners acts as general counsel for EBCE. So
Okay.
we have been working with them on this stuff. So there is sort of knowledge base also to draw upon with their experience.
Okay. So is that something that might be a separate agenda item, or would that be?
Yeah, if we're looking at more general contracting policies, then I think that would be a separate item.
Okay. Okay. So then I'll talk about that at the end then. So as far as this agenda item, I'm definitely supportive of a policy for unsolicited proposals. It sounds like everybody else is as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with that, we can, Ms. Boswell?
I just want to circle back on timing with bringing this back to the board. Would July be acceptable to the board to bring
Certainly.
back? Greg, is that doable?
July's fine. Yeah, that's
Okay. Thank
Okay.
you.
So this one's pretty simple. I'll go ahead and ask for a motion to move forward with an unsolicited proposal policy, incorporating the feedback that has been consensus feedback, and look for a motion to support that. Ms. Becker?
So moved.
Okay,
I'll second.
wonderful. And I will do a roll call vote, please.
Board Member Haviland,
Yes.
Board Member Becker,
Yes.
Chair Schumacher.
Yes, and that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And we will go ahead and move on from that to the request for any future agenda items. Any of the board members have any items that they'd like to add to a future agenda?
I do not.
Nope.
Okay, I would like to move to add to a future agenda bid evaluation criteria and a scoring system based off of the East Bay Community Energy system.
I'll
So add
second
that to, okay, thank you. And we'll do a roll call.
Board Member Becker,
Yes.
Vice Chair Haviland,
Yes. Yes.
Chair Schumacher.
Yes. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. All right. And with that, I thank everybody. We went only 18 minutes over today, but had a great conversation. It's lovely to have a conversation, as was mentioned at the beginning, with my colleagues about non-COVID items. And thanks staff for everything here. So any other board member comments before we go?
Good. Thank
No,
you.
look forward to our next meeting.
Okay. Thank you so much. And we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.